Hello, everyone. My name is Chase Berkey. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dark Horse CPAs. And I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us on our first ever town hall meeting. We're practicing safe social distancing, so all of us are participating in this meeting from our homes. So let's all just acknowledge how crazy of a time this is. Just want to check in with everyone, make sure everyone is doing all right. It's a tough time, but we're going to get through this together. And really that's what this town hall is about, is how we can partner with you, how we can give you some of the information that we know from our world and some of the things that we see our business clients doing and some of the questions they're asking, so that we can all start deploying these best practices to make sure that we not only survive this time, but we come out stronger on the other end. So we've received a number of questions over the last week that we really want to provide some clarity, in this video format for everyone to know, because there's a lot of things that, are stated explicitly, some things that aren't, and some things that we just kind of understand from what's probably going to happen, that we want to add some color and context to. So additionally, we also want to address, issues of liquidity that businesses are facing. John Warner, who's based in our St. Louis office, will be talking more about that and what you can do as a business to really make sure that you have the cash here and now, or at least the credit here and now to pay those bills and to keep the lights on. And then we'll be finishing up with Tom Pogwitz, who's based out of our Durango, Colorado office. Who will be talking a bit about the SBA's new Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And so really, just want to recap what most taxpayers know at this point and then get into some more of the nuanced questions thereafter. So on March 13th last week, California announced that they would move the filing and payment due date for tax year 2019 to June 15th. And then on Tuesday, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin announced that the new payment deadline is going to be July 15th for IRS tax payments. But he also said that the filing deadline remains April 15th. So payment due date is July 15th, filing due date is April 15th. And this relief is going to apply to taxpayers regardless of their filing statuses. They're individual taxpayers that owe $1 million or less. It's also going to apply to corporate taxpayers who owe $10 million or less. And for this purpose, consolidated groups of corporations are being treated as a single taxpayer. And most recently, yesterday, Wednesday, California announced that they are going to push their filing and payment deadlines to more closely line up with the IRS. So that new deadline for both payment and filing is July 15th for California purposes. Federal payment date, once again, July 15th. Filing date is still April 15th. So with that, I'd like to launch into some more of the nuanced questions surrounding some of this basic information. So start here with Max Fritz, our Director of Accounting and Tax. So Max, what happens to individual taxpayers that owe more than $1 million and corporations that owe more than $10 million?
So in these situations, the portion of the tax above those thresholds, 1 million for individuals and 10 million for corporations, is still subject to interest and penalties effective April 15th. You are granted essentially, I guess you're not subject to penalties for the amount below those thresholds. And it's also worth noting that this doesn't apply to your total tax overall. So to give you some context, assume an individual has a total tax balance of $1.5 million and you had withholdings throughout the year of $1 million. And come year end, your remaining balance due is $500,000. You would still qualify for this 7/15 payment date. So that's a big point to keep in mind. It's also worth noting that the interest and penalties, it doesn't apply, or the penalties doesn't apply to all the penalties. It's just the late payment penalties. So if you're severely under-withheld you can still have underpayment penalties. And Jordan's going to elaborate on this later in the town hall.
Gotcha. So as far as California goes, do they have these same $10 million thresholds or anything along those lines?
No, they do not. They've released no guidance on that. So 7/15 is your date for filing and payment, regardless of the amount owed with California.
Gotcha. And so this guidance came out from the Treasury after the deadline for corporations of March 16th, this past Monday. How are those entities that had a 3/16 deadline affected?
So at the IRS level, they are still subject to the, it's actually 3/16 this year deadline. So they would have needed to file extensions. However, the IRS has come out and said they'd be very lenient with their abatement on late filing if there's reasonable cause. California is given the automatic, 7/15 deadline, so there's nothing to worry about there. And then, individuals and C corporations are still subject to the 4/15 deadline where they need to file if no extension is going to be filed.
Gotcha. And so for the entities that are not on a calendar year basis, they're on a fiscal year basis, how does it impact those taxpayers?
They're largely unimpacted by this. For any corporations that are on a fiscal year, their returns are still due on the 15th day of the fourth month following the close of their calendar year. The only exception there would be if it's a June 30th fiscal year end, their returns would be due on September 15th of 2020. So essentially, I guess in summary there, it's any return that has a due date prior to 7/15, your tax would be due either on 7/15 or 4.5 months thereafter.
Great, thanks, Max. So this next question is going to be directed towards Susie Drennan, principal based out of San Diego here. So tell me a little bit about, what's the deal with Q1 and Q2 estimated federal tax payments for tax year 2020? How is this all being impacted given what we know now from the Treasury?
So for the IRS, this relief does include estimated tax payments for the year 2020 that were due on April 15th, 2020. The IRS has not indicated that the second quarter that's due June 15th is eligible for that deferral. So what we assume right now is quarter two is still due June 15th. Quarter one is due July 15th. And I do want to note that penalties and interest will begin to accrue on July 16th for that payment.
And I think just as a matter of logic, we could probably assume that the IRS will further clarify that Q2 is going to come out as a due date of June 15th, because it really doesn't make any sense that Q1 would be due later than Q2, but currently that's what we have. So what about California? Are they conforming to federal in this regard, or is it any different with them?
They are a little different. They're being a little more generous or upfront about quarters 1 and 2 being due on July 15th. So anything that was due between March 15th and July 15th is due on July 15th with California. Great.
So does California's relief include any other types of tax payments other than, your individual income tax? Is there anything else included there?
Yes, the new extensions apply to any business entity within California with those payments due March 15th to July 15th. So corporations, S corps, LLCs, partnerships, and any other entity with those payment due dates.
Great. Thank you, Susie. So I'm going to turn this next question over to Jordan Keller. So Jordan, as Max was kind of indicating in his response, what's going to happen to taxpayers that substantially under-withheld during the tax year, meaning that they didn't have one of the safe harbors to get them to a non-penalty zone? So they didn't withhold 90% of their current year's tax, nor did they do 110% of the prior year's tax. What's going to happen to those folks given what we now know from these changes?
Yeah, so for tax year 2019, the calculation is still going to be the same because it's derived off of a period prior to our federally declared disaster timeframe here. One thing to note is we are a pay-as-you-go system. So W-2 employees, you get federal income tax, state income tax withheld on every paycheck. For self-employed individuals or businesses, they're paying in quarterly estimates. You're obligated to pay in as you go and earn your dollars. So again, as you alluded, the calculation for individuals that have an AGI, adjusted gross income, under 150,000, they need to pay in the lesser of 100% of the prior year income taxes or 90% of the current year income taxes. If you have an AGI, again, adjusted gross income over 150,000, those taxpayers have to pay in 110% of the prior year taxes or 90% of the current year. So as we've already talked about, there has been a time frame set aside to where there's no interest and penalty calculated. So basically, if you have an underpayment on your tax return 2019 for any of those various reasons, then you essentially have an interest-free period here from April 15th to 7/15.
Gotcha. So can you tell us a little bit about how penalty abatement might work in these circumstances?
Yeah, so it'll still kind of fall under the normal situations to where you have to have a reasonable cause. You know, you're still obligated to file for that penalty abatement. One thing to note is there's not an abatement on interest that's been accrued for unpaid taxes. Now, if you're able to go through the process and abate those penalties, then you would essentially be abating the interest that's accrued and calculated on the penalties themselves. But that interest that's calculated on the tax will still be due if any tax is still owed and underpaid. You know, typical scenarios and situations: fire, casualty, natural disasters, serious illnesses, or even if you have an unavoidable absence of a family member or close relative. Those things would qualify for penalty abatement. Those are the things that we're going to be looking for here when we start looking into 2020 in the future.
Great. Thanks, Jordan.
Yep.
This next question will be for Nikki Potter. Nikki, do you think that the IRS is going to extend the original filing deadline to July 15th, given that it's still April 15th as of the time of this town hall meeting?
Yeah, so we're waiting to hear at this point in time. So like you said, Chase, it's March 19th. We still have not heard. It is scheduled to be April 15th at this point. The AICPA is really pushing the U.S. Secretary of Treasury to extend the filing deadline to July 15th. So there's a good chance of it happening, but what we're recommending to all of our clients is just to place an extension on their return if they feel that they're not ready to file at this point in time. So just to be safe, file an extension.
Sounded nice. So when are retirement plan contributions due? Has anything changed in that regard?
So good question. So nothing really actually has changed on that regard. So for 2019 contributions to retirement funds still need to be made by the filing of your return. So if you're filing, as of now, what we know, if you're filing by April 15th, they are due prior to filing, or if you extend, and the extension due date, would be October 15th, they would just need to be paid prior to filing the return.
Great. We also got a couple questions about people who owe taxes from tax year prior to 2019. Is there any sort of relief baked into this for them?
So unfortunately, no. Any prior year taxes owed are still accruing penalties and interest at this time.
Gotcha. Thanks, Nikki. This next question will be for Becca Sherman. So Becca, if they do extend the filing deadline, does this mean that we're going to have an extended 6-month period beyond July 15th, meaning that we'll go into potentially January 2021?
So it isn't clear at this point, since we are talking about a hypothetical situation, but it is unlikely that an extension would allow for another additional 6 months beyond the adjusted due dates. California, as an example, has their normal extended due dates in force, even though they did extend the original filing due deadline.
Great. So are there any extensions for payroll taxes, gift taxes, excise taxes, anything outside of the income tax realm?
No, right now there's nothing that applies to those. It's just the income tax.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Becca. So now I would like to turn the tables over to John Warner. He's been thinking a lot about liquidity strategies for businesses because one thing we know right now is that cash is king, and a lot of businesses are hard pressed for liquidity because their revenues have stalled, their accounts receivables have stalled, their businesses may have been forced to be shut down depending on where they are in the country. So that's first and foremost on just about every business owner's mind, no matter how much cash you have in the bank. So John, tell us a little bit about what business owners should be thinking when planning for liquidity during this time of crisis, really.
Yeah, like you said, cash is king, and it's something when in good times we sometimes don't recognize how important cash flow is because it's there for us. But now in a time like this where people, if you're not feeling the pinch already, you may be feeling it soon. It's really important to have some plans in place in order to access cash in order to keep your business running, to pay your bills, pay your employees, as much as you can. So there are a few options out there, and some of them are more long-term options. Some of them are more immediate fixes, if you will. So in the immediate camp, one thing that every business owner can do today is go out and apply for a line of credit with a commercial bank. It's really imperative to consider a line of credit because when you access a line, you don't have to pay any interest until you actually have to use the funds. But having it established so that when you do get to a point where you need those funds, you can quickly access those is really, really important. It's much better to have the line of credit set up now and then access it maybe in 2-3 weeks when you need it, rather than wait 2 or 3 weeks and then realize, oh shoot, I need to make payroll tomorrow and I don't have the funds. So making sure that you act quickly. I think line of credit is one of the first spots to go when thinking about this. Another quick option would be credit card. So obviously racking up credit card debt is not great in a lot of instances, but if you can access either a low balance APR or maybe even a zero balance APR card, or a card that, if you already have existing credit card debt, where you can transfer to a zero or low balance new credit card to cut down on those interest payments. In a emergency situation where you have to have funds, credit card is, a very viable option. You may down the road have some additional charges related to that, but you weigh that with the, can I continue the business versus am I gonna have to pay interest later? You have to, obviously most people are gonna say, I'll take the interest hit in the long term if I can't get a 0% APR card. So credit card, a good way to go, but again, sometimes those things take a couple of weeks to get it in the mail. So that's something that you want to act on sooner rather than later. Another option that we've seen through some payroll services is there are private third-party organizations set up where they actually allow you to put part of your payroll on a credit card. So you may still have to pay the taxes to the government and the state associated with the payroll. Those will still be required to be paid in cash in most instances, but you can almost you can put the balance of the payment on a card that you can then pay off at a future date. So if you can set up a 0% APR card and then put your payroll on that just to keep your employees engaged and keep them with the business, which that's something we'll probably want to address at a different later point in time. But keeping your good people with the business is going to be a challenge for some people coming up here soon. So being able to pay them obviously is a nice incentive to keep them around. So those three are more kind of immediate. Another thing you can look at is just talking to vendors, because you're going to have your balances due to vendors right now. You probably have some receivables from folks that you do work for. everyone's in the same boat right now, and everyone is trying to figure out how we're going to get through this. If you can communicate with the vendors and maybe work out some kind of deal where, I can pay you half right now and I'll pay you the other part down the road once we have some cash flow again. It's really important just to make sure that we continue to communicate with these people, even if we aren't working with them on a daily basis like we used to, before this coronavirus hit, because, you're going to need these vendors after this all peters out a little bit. Once we get back to business as normal, you don't want to have to, repair relationships that were hurt because of non-payment and lack of communication on when payments were going to be made. So making sure that you maintain good relationship with your vendors and with your customers is really important at this point in time. And, we're all in this together kind of mindset. Hopefully something can be worked out so that both parties can, succeed and survive over the next, 6-8 weeks, whatever this ends up being. So another option, it's not an immediate influx of cash, but the SBA has their economic injury disaster loan, which is really an important option for businesses that, even if they don't think they need the cash today, they may be needing it soon. So I think Tom can maybe speak to this program a little bit more and kind of give us some details on what someone should expect and what they need to do to get in on that program. Tom?
Absolutely. Thanks, John. So the SBA's moved very quickly to make these loans available. And like you were saying, they're not an immediate quick fix. It's going to take about 25 to 35 business days for these loans from the application date for them to actually fund. So the important thing to note there is business days. So that could be 5 to 7 weeks. So if you think you need one of these loans, we're encouraging our clients to act quickly on the application process. The loan terms, they're 30-year loans. It's a very low rate. It's 3.75%. You can get up to $2 million to help fund your operating expenses, your working capital. You can use those funds for payroll. You can use them for vendor payments, as we were just discussing. You can use them for fixed debt payments. So the SBA is really trying to help business owners meet their obligations. And this is a great product with which we can do that. There's a couple caveats here. You need to be in a declared disaster area. In our blog, we have a link so you can kind of look county by county if you're included in the disaster area. Some counties have been very slow to do this, so more counties are being added every day. So if you're not there yet, you can check that list daily and see when you've been added. Another important thing to mention here is there's no prepayment penalties. There's no application fees. You have 5 months to make your first debt payment. So again, if you think you're going to need this cash to keep your business solvent, we encourage you to apply early, because if you have it and you don't need it, you can always pay it back. There's no fee again to apply. There's no fee to prepay. So it's a great product. The SBA is really moving fast on this. So we can help people. They're going to need tax returns. They're going to need financials, and they're going to need personal financials. So if the application process is daunting, we're here to help. So any questions on that?
Yeah, just I think a point of confusion for some people might be what the collateral requirements might be for these sorts of loans.
Right. So loans under $25,000, there's no collateral requirement. Above $25,000, they're asking you to pledge collateral if you have it, and real estate can count for that. But if you have no collateral, it's not like you're disqualified. They're still going to help your business. They just want you to pledge anything you have available.
Great. And if a business doesn't have any track record, so no financial statements or tax returns, what should they do?
They can use their pro forma, so whatever business plan they have. And there's going to be a kind of a benchmark against actual results, if you have them, and your pro forma results against what the impact of COVID-19 actually was. And that's kind of the criteria they're going to use to evaluate how much you can receive.
Awesome. Well, that's honestly very helpful information. One other thing I think that's worth noting is that these loans are coming directly from SBA. They're not going through private banks. So that money is going to get to you as fast as it possibly can because there's not that middleman involved. So it's a very valuable program. So a lot of great information here. We're going to continue to keep all clients and everyone apprised of all the latest developments, all of the latest strategies, everything discussed today, you'll be able to find on our blog. We will be continuing to update that as time goes on. Additionally, we're going to have subsequent town halls where we actually invite the public to join to ask their questions live. We're going to do some deeper dives into some strategies that you can deploy to make sure that you get through this trying time and that you emerge stronger than you ever were prior to it. Whenever there's situations like this, there is a lot of fear and a lot of panic. But if you can have your head on straight and think strategically, there's a lot of opportunity out there at the same time. So in the meantime, we hope all of you guys stay safe, keep a safe social distance as we are doing here via this remote town hall. We wish everyone the best, and we're here to help. So please reach out with any and all questions, and we'll be talking to you soon.